If you don't have the fundamentals together, you have no business touching social media. If you do not know what you're going to be communicating, if you don't know what your company stands for, if you are not real clear on what your product is, what your mission is, what those fundamentals are, what your mission statement is, you have no business touching social media. You really have no business picking up the phone and talking to customers. You really shouldn't be communicating unless you're real clear on what to communicate. And the stakes get higher in social media because you have the opportunity to talk to more people than you ever have before. So it leads in really, really well, I think, to the things that Jerry was talking about. So let me figure out how we're... Okay, there is a fishbowl, I think, in the back. Brad, would you mind grabbing that fishbowl and passing it around? You've got a really good chance of winning today. We have a door prize, and it is a website audit. If you have a website, you should do this. Yeah, just business cards. If you have a website, you should do this every once in a while because basically a website is just an opportunity to reach customers. And what we do with this, it's like a tear down and rebuild of your website, where we take it apart and we discover what's working, what's not working, and a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in this presentation. Okay, so our intrepid volunteer is Brad, who is picking up your cards right now. Yeah, exactly. We're going to be using Brad as our example in some of the social media profiles, some of the things that he's done. He has a lot of the same objectives as the rest of us do, and we're going to look at some of the ways that he is meeting those objectives. Social media is a communication tool, nothing more, nothing less. So basically, let's talk about the quality of content. Has every phone conversation that you have ever had in your life been of really, really high value and high business value to your business? Have you made money on every phone call you've ever made? No. Okay. You talk to your friends, you talk to your parents, you talk to clients, they waste your time. You know, a lot of things happen on the phone that are very high quality and a very low quality, but most of us wouldn't do without a phone in our business. It's an absolutely essential sort of a thing. So that's about quality of content. Now let's talk about functionality. There are different kinds of phones. There are speaker phones, there are conference call phones, there are phones with lots of buttons so you can, you know, speed dial different people. Those things are there for different reasons. You can talk to a lot of people with some of them. You can talk to one person with great clarity in some cases. You can have video phones where you can see what someone is, see the other person at the other end. So phones are a pretty good analogy if we want to take social media into another metaphor and say, you know, this is something that we're all familiar with that has some of the same functionality. It's just a communication tool. That is all social media is. All social media is a website. Each of those channels of communication is just a website. Twitter is a website. LinkedIn is a website. Facebook is a website. A blog is a website. It's just websites that have different functionality and are able to do different functions, just like those different kinds of phones can do different kinds of things. Before we get too much further here, let me just ask the question, how many of you guys use social media now? Personal or professional, anything like that? Okay, great, a pretty good number. How many of you are suspicious of social media? Okay, very good. That's probably a very healthy attitude. I think too much and too little is made of social media. And my husband is actually an information security expert. We were talking about that earlier. So we're kind of a paradox. I'm a marketing person who says visibility is life, you know, and he is an information assurance expert. So his paradigm is that letting too much information out is a very bad thing. So it's the same as any other communication tool. You can say too much. You can get yourself in trouble. You can have your employees wasting all of their personal time on the phone. You can have people giving away your company secrets. You can have all kinds of bad things happening on the phone. You can have all kinds of good and bad things happening in social media. All right, what social media is not? Magic. It won't fix your business if you don't have a good business model, if you don't have a good product to sell, if you don't have your fundamentals down, if you don't have a good business plan. That becomes rapidly apparent in social media. So that is something you want to be really careful of. Anybody who tells you you're going to go from zero to millions of dollars overnight is full of hooey. Anybody who tells you that they can make you #1 on Google is full of hooey. They actually changed the algorithm in Google December of last year so that search results in Google are local. So anybody who tells you that they can get you to #1 in Google and is going to charge you $10,000 to do it, run the other way. Anybody who tells you that you can get 10,000 followers on Twitter, that may be true if you give away a product, but it's also true that if you put a table out in front of your business and say free stuff, you're going to get a lot of people coming in and taking that free stuff, and then they're going to leave. So, that's a business practice that a lot of people are doing with social media. Not sound. Social media is not exempt from the laws of business, and it is not exempt from the laws of gravity. It is not exempt from the laws of physics. Anything you can and should be doing with any other business practice, you can and should be using with social media. Okay, so let's talk about Brad. Brad has some objectives, and you can tell me if these are accurate. I think this is what we talked about. You are promoting a product or service, which is Airport Business Magazine. He is building a professional network, as we all should be, and obtaining ideas for future articles. So all of us have some objectives that are similar to that, I think. We're all selling something. If you work for a company and your product is selling well, your life is good. If you work for a company, your product is not selling, your life is uncertain. So, we're all in the business of sales. Building a professional network. We all have questions that we want to ask each other. We all need referrals to different people, as Jerry had talked about. We all may, at some point, need to look for a job or need to look for a job for someone else. There are times when we are actually outplacing someone. I've used my LinkedIn network to help with that. So there's lots of ways to do that. And obtaining ideas for future articles, we're always looking for ideas in our businesses. So those are our objectives. This is a textbook, well, it's a version of a textbook marketing plan. And we're going to talk about where social media fits into this model. So taking that first objective of selling a product. If you look across the top, there's kind of the way that people meet you for the first time. It's one of those things, from word of mouth to telephone directories. There's some way that people come in contact with you for the first time. In the middle, we've got a point at which someone knows you but hasn't purchased anything from you, and that time in the current economic situation has gotten kind of long, where people may know you for 6 months or a year or 2 years before they purchase anything from you. Those things happen. Then you make a sale, and you also have an opportunity at the bottom for upsells and renewals. So the places where social media really is important, I think, are in red. And this is also on the back of your book if you want to see a better copy of this. So you can see those are the places that social media really, really can make an impact in your marketing plan. So how do people find you? I'm actually going to go ahead a slide. Okay, this is not a great picture, but you guys are in Las Vegas. You've seen the billboards, with all the moving showgirls and musicians and magicians and more showgirls and so forth. They spent a lot of money on those billboards, didn't they? And they spent a ton of money on electricity. Those things are not there because they're not trying to sell something. Obviously they're very effective, or they wouldn't be doing that. This is like your website. A lot of people put a lot of money into their website. They put a lot of motion and color and music and all these things into their website. And then they bury it somewhere on a dirt road in Kansas. They don't build these kinds of signs and put them by a dirt road in Kansas. They put them where the most traffic is. So there's a very good reason to use social media, is to drive traffic to your website. If you're not getting any traffic, then you've wasted a lot of money on any of the marketing that you're doing. So going back one, we're going to talk about, these are the different ways that you can drive traffic to your website. Word of mouth is one. You're meeting people at this convention, you're handing them a business card, they're going back to their office and they're typing in your URL and they're going to your website. Social media is another, and search engines are very closely linked to that. And we'll talk about how those things are related in just a few minutes. Direct mail, radio, TV, print, phone directories, all those things are ways that you can drive traffic to your website. But social media is my favorite. so we'll talk about that exclusively today. Search engines. What words do people use when they are looking for your product or service? Brad uses probably airport business. That's a pretty good one. Airport management, those kinds of related terms, things like that. And those happen to be in your product name, Airport Business Magazine. That's pretty easy. Anyone that has a business that is not related to their product, like Summit Aviation is one of my clients. They sell a subscription service to FAA publications. That's a little bit more difficult. It's not in their business name, so we need to work a little bit harder at making that work. One thing I want you to do, if you do nothing else today, actually there are two things I'm going to ask you to do. This is one of them. Pretend you're in the market for the product or service you provide and look for yourself on the internet. Go to Google and type in whatever it is that you sell, whatever product or service that you're selling, and see what comes up. Those are the kinds of things that you need to think like in order to drive traffic to your website. Okay, AviationPros.com, pretty good. Comes up first. Having the business name as your product name is a big advantage there. But there are also some things that you can do by creating more content on the web. You look bigger to the search engines. And creating more content on the web is easiest using social media. And the reason for that is because it is designed for interaction and it is designed for content building. This is a tool called, it's in Google and it's in the AdWords section. What it does is it lets you look for the words that people look up. These are actual searches that people made in Google. So you can see how many times airport business has come up in those searches. 49,000 times. That's a lot of traffic. That's a healthy objective, is to get a good corner on that traffic. Airport Business Magazine, 210 people looked for last month. That's still a pretty healthy number, but you want to be looking for the biggest value key phrases that are related to your product or service. And we could spend a whole day on search engines, but we're not going to talk about that. How do people find you? Here we looked up. Let's say I met Brad last year at NBAA, and I didn't remember what magazine he worked for. If that happened, I would remember, okay, he's in aviation, so I would just look at Brad McAllister Aviation, see what comes up. What comes up first? Brad McAllister's LinkedIn profile. His blog is on there, and his Twitter profile are on there as well as some articles that he's written. So he's done a really good job of positioning himself. So if I met Brad and I didn't remember anything else about him, I could find him, and I could find information that he wants me to see, not information that's out there accidentally. So that's he's done a really great job with that. There are two keys to social media. One is great content. If you do not know what you're saying, if you don't have that business plan down, if you don't have the reason that you're in business down really well, you're going to look pretty silly making a lot of noise about it. So, you want to have those things, those fundamentals down really well. And the second thing is great relationships. You want to have fans. You do not want to have people complaining about you. And it doesn't matter whether you're on social media or not. Your customers are. Social media is huge right now. Last night on David Letterman, there was the top 10 reasons that you may be spending too much time on Twitter. So, your customers are on Twitter, are on social media, including Twitter. Having good relationships with your customers is more important than ever because customers are noisier than they ever have been. Everything else is just tools and technical stuff. So, if you don't know a particular tool, you don't know a particular, you don't know that much about Twitter, you don't know that much about LinkedIn, that's okay. It's much easier to find somebody who can do that for you than it is to have a good message, a good product, a good business model, and to have a good marketing plan. Okay, this is Brad's blog. And blogs are an excellent form of social media. They're really the most controllable channel in social media because you make it up, you control the design, you control the context, you control who you link to, you control everything about this environment. And you can have a blog set up pretty easily. It's not terribly expensive. It's less expensive actually than most website design projects. And then the web developer will hand you the keys and say, you go forth and put whatever you want in it. And it's maybe one of the most cost-effective ways of creating a lot of content. Of course, you have to know how to write, and that's kind of a problem for some of us. Brad's a great writer. I do a lot of writing. I majored in communications and things like that. So, you need to get somebody who is good at writing and make sure that you employ them. You also have a lot of materials that you've probably already developed. You have product sheets, you have spec sheets, you have product brochures, you have testimonials from customers. You have a lot of material that you could already put on here without going to a lot of extra effort. So a blog is probably my very first recommendation for social media if you're looking at a channel to get into. So yeah, the blog becomes kind of the hub of your social media universe. You can publish information really easily from a blog to any of these other channels. But I don't know if any of you guys remember MySpace. It's kind of gone downhill. It used to have a pretty big market share, and it's probably less than 10% now of the social media market share, whereas Facebook has been growing like crazy, and Twitter has been growing exponentially as well. So if your materials are centered in something that you control, it doesn't matter what happens to these other channels. You're just publishing copies to those other places, and you control the materials you've invested in. So that's a recommendation about social media. Another one, grab your own URL. This is not our Brad McAllister, this is some other Brad McAllister. If you go to AviationPros.com, you will see something that is not really reflective of our Brad. So, if you have a name, if you have a product name, if you have a company name, anything that you want to protect, go buy that URL. It costs $9.99 on GoDaddy or Namecheap or one of the other providers. And make sure that you protect that. Even if you don't do anything with it, you just don't want somebody else, running off with that and doing something that may not reflect well on you. LinkedIn. Besides a blog, LinkedIn is probably, it's one of the very best channels for business people. The reason is it was made by and for business people, and it's like Facebook for very serious professionals. It has a lot of great functionality that allows you to really interact with other people, find people with common interests, find people who went to the same school as you, people who have worked at the same company, people who are in the same industry, and things like that. All 500 of the Fortune 500 are represented in LinkedIn, and 499 of them are represented at the director level and above. So these are not kids, these are not low-level employees. These are people who are influential. These are people who can help you with whatever it is that you're trying to do. People with more than 20 connections are 34 times more likely to be approached with a job opportunity than people with less than 5. I've personally gotten 2 job offers from LinkedIn, where that was where they found me. I've gotten a number of client referrals, and it's been really, really helpful for me. So if you do one social media channel besides a blog, even if you don't do a blog, LinkedIn is very, very helpful. We're not going to go into a lot of detail about how to do these things because of time, but just a few things about this. You can ask for references on your LinkedIn profile, and that makes it much more credible. So, if you have someone who has worked with you at a certain place and said, I worked with Brad at Airport Business Magazine, and he did a great job writing about my business. You have a number of connections. You've got your websites listed there. That's another link that adds back to that search engine traffic. You've got places to put your summary and your specialties, and it's like a resume. You want to spend as much time on this as you do on your resume, probably even more because this is public. So you don't put anything out here or on any social media channel that you don't want the world to know. Because nothing is secure. I don't care what your settings are. I don't care if they say friends only or anything like that. Social media programs are hacked all the time. So, you just want to make sure that anything that you say in the social media is something that you would feel comfortable leaving a pile of in Grand Central Station in a pile of papers and, letting people pick those up. This is another type of page on LinkedIn. It's not as common, but it's really a powerful thing. It's the company page. This is Cygnus's company page, and your company should have one. It's another way of generating another link from a very high-placed source, which is LinkedIn, and allowing all those connections to happen and letting people find you more easily. So that's really helpful. LinkedIn groups. If you're in aviation, there are a ton of groups on LinkedIn that are concerned with different aspects of aviation. And you really should, if you have time, become involved in 2 or 3 of these and spend maybe 10 minutes a week looking through some of the discussions that are going on. It's great market research, that informal research that Jerry was talking about. This is a great place to do it. You can ask a question in one of these groups. You know, do you use a cell phone briefer for pre-flights? And get a lot of great information from people who have no access to Grind. You know, they may or may not be customers from you. They're really, really helpful. Facebook, personal profile. This is Brad's. And it looks great. He publishes his articles here. Again, if you have a blog, you can publish those articles to Facebook, which gives you a lot of visibility. Facebook is really powerful because it allows you to post photos and do those in a really attractive way. Video, you can post video on Facebook and get a lot of traffic that way. It's more functional, I guess, than LinkedIn, but it is also not as professional. You have to be careful with Facebook because there are a lot of people on here that are not as concerned with your professional image as you are. So, I mean, everybody has a cousin or a nephew or somebody like that makes cute comments and puts funny pictures on things. You know, that's great, but you want to be really careful who you give access to your profile and who you want to friend and who you want to not be friends with, because they may put things out there that may reflect badly on you. And if you're a professional person and you're using LinkedIn, or if you're using Facebook as a professional tool, some people have 2 profiles, a personal one and a professional one. I don't recommend that because it's just more time, more work, more hassle and everything else. I just keep my own Facebook profile very professional because I don't need to have a lot of stuff out there that's not professional anyway. So that's, and it looks like Brad does the same things. Yeah, cool. All right. Facebook fan page. This is the fan page for Airport Business Magazine. And again, you know, you can see people are leaving comments. They've got 60 fans. You can link to your suppliers, your customers' pages, your people that you want to get to know, your Chamber of Commerce, you know, things like that. There's ways of interlinking these things that will bring you more traffic, more fans, and more fun. There is not a section on Facebook in your pamphlet because well, the 2 that I recommend most highly are LinkedIn and Twitter, if you're just starting out with social media. But Facebook is also, since a lot of people are already on it, it's a great way to just extend your presence there. Twitter. I was on the fence about Twitter for years. It sounded like the dumbest idea I'd ever heard of in my whole entire life. You know, basically you get 140 characters and that's it. And, you know, what earthly good can you do in 140 characters? Besides the fact that at that time, the people that were on Twitter were saying really trivial stuff. And it was really not interesting to me what people had for breakfast and things like that. Since then, Twitter has actually grown up quite a bit. It can be very, very powerful. And at a minimum, this is a fabulous place to do market research. If you have a product, you should be looking for that product in Twitter and see, you know, who's saying what. There's in your book, there's an example of Bell helicopters. There's someone who is commenting on a particular brand of Bell helicopter and saying, you know, it'd be great if it had a better engine or if it had a better lifting capability. Now that's information that Bell helicopter would probably pay money for. I don't know if any of you have ever done marketing research groups. You know, the formal research groups, I'm sure you probably have. They're great, but people sometimes have a tendency to tell you what you want to hear. Especially if you're paying for their lunch. So, you know, but on Twitter, it is absolutely uncensored, which is the best and the worst thing about it. People can say anything about anybody. And you should be looking up your company, you should be looking up your product, you should be looking up your name at least once a week on Twitter and make sure of what's being said about you. You can't prevent people from talking about you any more than you can prevent people from talking on the phone or talking in cocktail parties. But on Twitter, you have the opportunity to see what's being said. And if you're doing business with the public, you're likely to have an unhappy customer at one point or another. And if they are social media inclined, Twitter is one of the most likely places for them to vent. So I don't know if any of you have heard this story about United Breaks Guitars. That's a video that was on YouTube that got 8 million hits from a country music singer whose guitar was broken by United Airlines. And he didn't feel like he was getting served appropriately by their customer service. And he wrote a country song about it, put it on YouTube, and tweeted it on Twitter. It got a lot of airplay, and a lot of people found that to be a reason not to fly United. United eventually jumped in and said, okay, let's solve this problem. We apparently slipped through the cracks of our customer service situation. It happens. They actually did a video reply, and the country music singer that was involved in it posted a reply to his video that ended up being probably good publicity for both of the folks involved. But since United took a long time in answering this guy, it built up quite a head of steam before they were able to kind of cut that off and say, we want to respond to you and we want to appear to be responsive. Not just appear to be, but actually be responsive. And that's another reason why you really have to have your ducks in a row, your business in order, your customers happy and everything else now more than ever, because customers are more powerful than ever. Twitter is market intelligence. That's a great use of it. Twitter is a conversation. Again, you can ask questions. What do you like about airline seating? Do you like the assigned seats, or do you like the free-for-all boarding? You can ask questions of people and they'll respond to you. So it's great market intelligence. Lots of CEOs Twitter. Richard Branson of Virgin Group, George Colony of Forrester Research, John Battelle of Federated Media, Bob Parsons of GoDaddy, Tony Heisch of Zappos, Jonathan Schwartz, Sun Microsystems. There are a lot of people that actually have a Twitter account and are actually on Twitter that are people that you wouldn't expect to have the time. And I'll tell you a little secret, most of them don't have the time. They have ghost tweeters. Just like you can have a ghost speechwriter, somebody that writes your annual report, someone that writes your blog posts, things like that. If you have a good set of guidelines and a person that you trust to have a pretty good head about business, you can have a ghost tweeter. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing. Barack Obama, I'm sure, is not doing his own tweets. Just like he doesn't answer all of his letters, if you write a letter to the White House, you get a letter in return. If you write a tweet, your company should be responding to all of those in one way or another. That's something you should look into. So to kind of sum up, actually, let me ask if there's any questions about, I guess we've got a little bit of time. Social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, blogs. Wow. Either I did a really good job or everybody's still kind of, yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I've heard that there is...
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we have a mic. We have a talking stick, so you have to wait for the talking stick.
Okay. So I've heard that there is some type of technology that you can go onto and put on, and I'm very new to the social media thing, that you can put on your website or have it separately, and it feeds into all of these. So you post it once and it goes to your blog, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Okay.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, there is a thing called an RSS feed. It's real simple syndication. And I believe that's what you're talking about. There's actually a lot of technologies coming and going. Okay. When you set up a blog properly, it will publish an RSS feed, which is basically a data stream that can be picked up by any of the other social media if you have your settings set properly. And I'm not going to get into which buttons you push and how to do all that, but you're absolutely right. And that's one of the very powerful things about having a blog, is because you control that RSS feed. So if you have a company that has a blog, then you have a continuous news feed about that company that's going to all of the outlets that pick those up. That can be, the Google readers, the, people who have blog feeds where they look for certain keywords. So just as an example, I wrote an article on pricing strategy not too long ago. And I had that picked up by Bené Wilson at Aviation Week. She gave me a call and said, you wrote an article about pricing strategy. Talk to me some more about that. And if I had not had that on an RSS feed, she would not have picked up on that. So, it's just another way to get visibility. And again, my objective in marketing is to get as much visibility as I can, because I have to assume that all those fundamentals are in place, and I have to assume that somebody's doing the information security end. But in order to do marketing, you have to take risks. So you want as much visibility as you possibly can. RSS feed is a fabulous way of doing that. And I didn't talk about that because it's kind of an automatic thing when you do a blog and when you do it properly. Yeah, good question. Yeah, Brad.
A couple questions.
Okay.
There are some tools on the web now that allow us to manage several social networking platforms at once.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about that? And two, explain the hashtag phenomenon that seems to be spreading.
Okay. First, there are some tools or utilities that let you publish from one of these channels to another. I'm not a huge fan of them usually, and the reason is because Twitter is 140 characters or less. If I publish my Twitter feed to my Facebook page, I'm going to get a lot of these posts that are 140 characters or less, and I'm not using the full capability of Facebook. So I'm not using video, and I'm not using pictures and things like that. So, basically, you're sacrificing to the lowest common denominator when you use those. Or, if you publish from Facebook to Twitter, it's going to truncate it to 140 characters, and you're going to sometimes get awkward. So, yeah, they can be a good time saver, and in some cases I've seen them work well, but again, you have to, as a marketing professional, I would advise against it because I want to use each of those channels to the best of its capability, and that doesn't do that for me.
I would say
Yeah.
what I like more about those tools is
Yeah.
the fact that I can just see everything
Yeah.
on one page.
Okay.
The comments or the tweets that are sent out also on
Yeah.
as
Right.
well. I can kind of monitor that all on one page, which is what I like.
Yeah, and that's
From there, you can go off and separate platforms.
right. Absolutely. And as an individual, that's probably a really great idea. And as a marketing professional, I kind of have a different objective than you do. I'm not as interested in saving time as I am at using those channels as effectively as I can. So, again, it depends on your objectives. So that's, we'll take one more question and. Oh, yeah, hashtags, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. A hashtag, let's see if we've got one in our screenshot. Dang, we do not. Okay. A hashtag is basically pound and then a word. For example, pound NBAA is a hashtag that is used for NBAA's conventions and things like that. If I have a booth at an NBAA convention, I will publish tweets saying, pound NBAA, I'm in booth 302. And I'm giving away something fabulous. So that's a way of allowing people to zone in really quickly on a very specific topic. Another hashtag that's really popular is pound BizAV, B-I-Z-A-V. There isn't really a directory of these hashtags because people make them up. For example, for this conference, I asked Brad if there was a hashtag for the conference, and he said no, and I made one up. I think I may be the only one using it, but there's a hashtag for it. So if you're organizing an event, and there's a lot of people on Twitter that want to be communicating with each other, you may want to set up a hashtag and use that as a means to broadcast information that's very specific to a very specific group. So excellent question, thank you. Yeah, we'll keep going, and then we'll open it up for questions for both of us at the end. Yeah. Okay.
Hashtag, how would you set it up and use it effectively? Let's say I have an annual event that I want to promote, And so I put the pound and the name of the event, and then how would I use that effectively?
Okay.
Does that just drive the business to that particular name of the event, or how does that work?
Tell me about your event. What's it about?
Well, it's an annual event that we do. It's called Sky Fair, and we basically just have, military. Well, this year will be a patriotic theme because we're having it on September 11th.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to have the military, several Apache helicopters and different things there. We're also going to market to the youth because we'll have Young Eagle flights, a lot of them. We'll have helicopter flights. Dennis Buin will be bringing over his speedster racers. I mean, it's a local event, but I would like to drive people to it on the internet. Everybody's on.
Yeah.
So how do I use this hashtag effectively?
Okay. You have a fabulous demographic for this because the Young Eagles, you've got a local event and things like that. There is probably a hashtag for your location. So first of all, look up your city on Twitter, search for your city, and see if there is a hashtag for it. So I would use that hashtag and then also make one up for your event, Pound Skyfair. See if it's being used by anyone else. And you can look those up on Twitter. Is probably the best way to use it, is just that search window on the side. And if nobody else is using it, start using it. Yeah, it's one of those self-proclamation kinds of deals where there's no central authority. So that's the good and the bad thing about it. And then just say pound, city name, pound Skyfair. We'll have free rides for Young Eagles. And again, you want to communicate one idea in each tweet. So then you'd have pound city name, pound Skyfair, Apache helicopter rides, or whatever else you have. And you'd probably have a series of tweets. And you could just set that up to go automatically. Fabulous. Cool. Okay. So to wrap it up, we'll just, the web is just a mode of communication. And social media is just a set of tools that uses that mode of communication. And the keys to social media are great content and great relationships. And it's really not as complicated. Well, you can make it as complicated as you want. I just actually spent, like I said, 4 days in a social media class. And I do that every single year. And every single year I learn a lot of things that I didn't know the previous year. So we crammed 4 days into 45 minutes. You guys are so smart. So, back to the marketing plan just really quick. Again, the places that we use this in Brad's marketing plan. Driving traffic to his website. Does your website capture leads? That's a question we need to ask. Does your website capture leads?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so once you have those leads captured, then you can keep publishing to those people with social media, blog articles, and basically just keep those people coming back until they subscribe to your newsletter or get sick of you and unsubscribe. One of the two. And ideally, you want to keep people engaged. So you want to talk to people at least once a week or once a month or once a quarter at least. But people forget about you and they go off to other things, and we're also overwhelmed with information that if you don't stay in contact with people, they go away. And then after the sale, upsells and renewals. Do you use any social media for renewals and upsells of the magazine?
Not yet, though
Okay.
we're young at it, so
Right.
we're always finding new ways to use it.
Right, okay. So yeah, those red things, and they are redder in your book than they are on the screen, are great places to consider using social media tools. And we didn't talk too much about the how, but we just talked about the what today. So I think, let me make sure I'm done. Okay, Brad's objectives, we talked about that. Action items. Okay, there was one last slide. Look for your company, product, or service on Google. Resolve to make your company, product, or service easier to find by taking up more space on that search page that you control. Use the tools that work best for you. Blogs, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. There's also YouTube. There's also MySpace. There's also Plaxo. There's also. We could go on for days. Register your name, your company name, and your product names on every platform you can. So if you want your Twitter name, go to Twitter and register your name, even if you don't use it. You don't want somebody else using it. On Facebook, you can get custom URLs. So facebook.com/whatever, whatever your name is. Make sure that you reserve those, even if you don't use them right away. And consider a social media policy. You probably have a policy for the way that the phone is used in your company. People can use it only on breaks for personal calls. People can, not be divulging company secrets on the phone. I mean, whatever your policy is, make sure you have one in place for social media.